Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva. And it is time for another Mondays with Melba. Super excited to have on Representative Ashley Gantt from House District 109. She is a Florida state rep. She is no stranger to Mondays with Melba. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on today.
No problem, Melba. Thank you so much for having me again.
So we got to get to it. There is so much to discuss. Now, this was your first full, term as a legislator. So this would be your second time up to Tallahassee for legislative session, and it was a tough one. So can you share a little bit about some of the problematic laws that have passed? But also at the same token, what you've been able to accomplish despite being in such a tough environment.
So last session was first session jitters, and it was difficult because of it being the first time and the extremism of the policies. This session was kind of familiar in the sense where, like, okay, I know where things are. I know where offices are. I'm not getting lost or trying to figure out like how to get a bill agendaed and everything. But the policies were still really bad. They weren't as controversial, but they were well, I can't even say that. They were still controversial. We had the child labor bill where it allows children to work like adults. It allows poor children to work like adults. We have a bill that is going to really devastate families in Miami-Dade County, the heat protection and local wage bill, 433 and 705. So both of those are living wage bills. We just had a slew of different bills. The education bill, I can't remember the bill number, but it allows or it disallows teachers to be taught and trained on how to actually teach accurate history under the guise of identity politics, which neither one of the bill sponsors could actually answer what that meant. But yet we have a bill talking about communism. We had a lot of detrimental criminal justice bills that were passed. It was just the homeless encampment bill. So that bill was signed by the governor, the squatters' rights bill. And like throughout the process, some of these bills got less worse. Okay. So like the squatters' rights. Yeah. Like the squatters' rights bill was absolutely horrible when it first came out because you had to have a notarized lease. And I was like, when was the last time you ever rented an apartment? Because leases aren't generally notarized unless they're a commercial lease. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not talking about commercial leases. You're talking about residential homes or residential leases. So it was literally all over the board when it comes to legislation. And then this session, I focused on bills. I introduced bills that would help families. So a bill for early learning education, for paid family leave for state employees. That was just 2 weeks more than what the governor signed in an executive order, sua sponte. And then I had a number of bills. And what I learned, people keep saying, oh, trust the process, work the process. So when we're in Tallahassee, the process is you file your bills, you take a letter to the chair of the first committee that it's referred to. The speaker refers the bills to the committee, right? And then you take a letter, you go set up a meeting, you lobby your bill, you talk about it and everything, and then you continue to basically pester or harass the committee chair to put your bill on. However, the speaker has already greenlit what Dem bills, if a Dem bill is going to move at all, what Dem bill is going to move. If, and then this session, it was very funny because for me and a couple of other reps, like it was just pulling teeth to try to even get a meeting with the speaker. And so it was difficult in that way. Like the rules are always weaponized, but the rules were weaponized even more. So it was very important to learn the rules, to know what the rules are, and say, well, no, you can't do this. Or, even in committees, one committee chair tried to stop me from asking questions. Well, what rule is that under? We have this room for 3 hours. I was elected just like you.
So I have a question for you. What was the commonality between you and the other reps who were not able to get their bills heard?
Black women Dems.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I was just throwing it out there because it could be nothing, or it could be a lot of something. And
Yeah.
interesting. Very interesting.
And it wasn't just Black women, but for the most part, it was.
Mm, mm.
So,
yeah. Yeah, but thank you so much for telling us about the process, because most of the times, again, some of us a little older
just don't know.
don't know, but also remember, like, like those early Saturday morning cartoons, how I am only a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill. Like, some of us got that, but
Yeah.
a lot of us did not get the civic education to know exactly how a bill moves through the process, and that even though you could come with the best of intentions and introduce bills that would be helpful, the speaker can block it, the committee head can block it, that a lot of there's other folks that can get in the way of you being able to accomplish what you set out to do. So that's a very interesting and a very important dynamic that you spoke about.
Right.
So can you talk about just kind of bringing things locally to HD 109? There's been some issues happening in Brownsville. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of, who plays a role and how all of this can be addressed?
So that actually happened. The issue, which was an attempted annexation of the Brownsville area by Hialeah. So that happened last session, 2023. It started, I started hearing things when I was in Tallahassee in 2023. And so what did that do for me? That led me down the rabbit hole while I'm in Tallahassee, while we're still in session. And I'm still reading my bills, figuring out what the annexation process really is, because that's all county. Of course, as a state rep, I need to be aware and everything, but that's the county, that's the county commissioners, that's the community. So that's local. And while I am there to support and be involved, there's a lot of preemption going on at the state level that I continue to fight against, because I believe that our local electeds have the ability, the wherewithal, and we're elected just like we were to handle the local issues that are in their purview. So I was up there making phone calls, figuring out what was going on, what was, I went through the process. And when I say making phone calls, talking to lawyer friends who do this for a living, and figuring out, like, okay, if these steps are supposed to be done, then making calls, what has been done, what hasn't been done. So I knew that was dead in the water. They kind of showed their hands. But I would say, was it a wake-up call? I don't think it was a wake-up call, because it's not something that we're unaware of, that Hialeah is attempting to come west into what has traditionally and historically been Black neighborhoods. As far as annexation or incorporation into the city. So that's what happened with Brownsville. The community, they spoke against it very vehemently and passionately, and very directly. And so it failed, but I knew it was going to fail because the proper procedures, like it was like asking for a JOA at arraignment. Like, that's not how things go.
And hang on, to clarify for folks, asking for a judgment of acquittal, which is basically saying, judge, throw out the charges at the time that the charges are being filed, is like, we went to lawyers speak for a second.
Yeah, sorry. So that's
cool,
for trial. And
yeah,
asking for that when you first come to the court the very first day. So it was, that was an example. It was just out of order. And so now the community is on notice. Like, okay, this is their plan, or this is their intention. So we have and I don't think the community was not on notice, but I think it's just a lot more at the forefront now.
Yeah, just that reminder that,
Yeah.
sort of like Coretta Scott King's mantra about, democracy and rights are fought for with every generation. You can't sit on your laurels and say, okay, we beat that back, we don't have to worry about it ever
Right.
again. No, okay,
Right.
you may not have to worry about it this year, but next year they can come back with something 5 years from now. So it's about getting organized and all of that. But it was very good that at least you read the procedure, understood that this was going to fail, but still were able to stand in solidarity with the community to make
Correct.
sure that they
While I was in Tallahassee.
fighting
And
bad boys.
also it just made it a lot more important for me as a Black Miamian, a young millennial who is part of the next generation of leadership, to really understand what kind of strategic moves need to be made going forward, like a big plan. So I've created this 15, 20-year idea in my head that I'm still getting together. But like, that's really what we have to do. That's what's being done. So a lot of the stuff that we see now, baby, this is from the 90s. This is from the early 2000s. A lot of what we see, like from even 10 years ago, that started in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So who was there in the 90s, and like what kind of information do we receive? And just looking at it from that lens. And now that I've finished my first two sessions, honey, the amount of information that I've learned,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of resources that I am compiling, pushing out to the community, like these are already here, because you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, okay.
Yes. I mean, I will compliment, because I do get a variety of emails from, commissioners, different elected officials laying out, this is the meetings I've gone to, this is what's going on. I will say, like, yours and Rep Anna Escamani's are like the best. And it's not me, because I could also say nothing, right?
Mhm.
It's not me just being trying to be like a hype woman, but like for real, it's well laid out. There's graphics, there's lots of space. It's like, click here if you need to register to vote. Click here if you're having a problem with trash pickup. Like, very easy and accessible, which, to contrast some other people, I'm not calling names or whatever, but even in the Democratic Party, who send out these newsletters that is just like one big long set of text. And you're sitting here like, if you have a problem or if you just need a contact number really quick, you can't get that information so quickly. So I really want to commend you on making sure that you're releasing information that's accessible to the public. Not just you giving the information, but you make sure it's accessible and easily understandable to them, which to me is true leadership. So thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that. And my team will also be very happy that you said that too, because I'm like, send me the draft. I don't like this, change this. And I just want it to be like user friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have to go through a process with that. So when I send out newsletters from my office, that has to be approved by the Speaker of the House office.
Really?
There's also a process with that, yes. And so sometimes it goes through a couple iterations and we have to resend it. And, that I have the option of, like, I specifically chose to send it like as a state email. But yeah, that's also a process. Like, there are so many things that I learned that people don't know, but I do also have an option to just send it directly from a non-state paid account. Like the platform is paid for from my state account. It's so many things that people just don't know. And honestly, I didn't know a lot of it. And so I'm sharing that information for education purposes. Like, I want people to know, people to be engaged, people to be involved, so that they know, like, if it's involving a state agency, call me. I can get on the phone with them and call them. But if it's a federal, I'm going to work with Congresswoman Wilson's office, who I work with all the time. And they are just mind blowing and phenomenal with the response time, getting the answers. If it's a local county thing and you're in an unincorporated area, then I'm going to go to either Commissioner Bastian, Commissioner Hardiman, or Commissioner Higgins. I have three different commissioners. If it's the city of Miami or Opelika, then I go to them and we talk and we collaborate. So I've been very fortunate to develop these relationships with the local and the federal electeds that I share. And of course, Senator Jones, I actually have three senators. Senator Jones, who is the senator of a majority of my district, Senator Garcia, and Senator Avila. Senator Avila is actually the senator over Brownsville. And I'm still chipping away trying to get a meeting with him so that we can specifically talk about that little area in Brownsville, or that area of Brownsville is a significant area that he represents, so that we can actually collaborate, because something like that with the annexation shouldn't have happened like it happened. But, the narrative of some people is like, oh, because I'm the state rep, they thought they could do it. Well, that has said nothing to do with me, actually. It's local. But also, let's talk about, if we're going to impute it on me, let's pull in all parties that represent this area so we can all be at the table. So it's been very interesting. Just the dynamics and the feedback that I've received. And but Senator Jones has been a phenomenal partner every step of the way. And just his experience has been someone I can call at 7 a.m. Hey, like, how do I do this? Or can we do this? And I also want to say this, okay? When I got into office, I had no benefit of a transition meeting, zero. And I asked several times. I was like, listen, it's not about me. This is about the community. There may have been some projects my predecessor was working on that I need to pick up on or whatever. Like, I've had many people call me like, oh, he was working on this with me. You don't have the information. No, I didn't receive anything. So a lot of the stuff where, the saying that I'm not reinventing the wheel, I've literally had to reinvent every single wheel and figure out things and ask people and set up meetings and, hey, are you available this day? Are you available this day? Are you available this day? Like, I've had to do that because I didn't want my community to suffer because of a person's lack of desire to transition me into the office.
So I'm gonna say in between the lines what you're not saying. I'm gonna put it out there because I can. Okay, so let's be clear on how the course of events went. So before Rep. Gantt was duly elected in 2022, the person that held the seat before her was Representative James Bush. Now, most of the time he voted consistent with the Republicans, despite his registration with the Democratic Party. He voted in favor of abortion bans. He voted in favor of the Don't Say Gay law. He was basically supporting book bans and, thought it would be cute to walk around and talk about how he was going to preside over Ashley Gantt's political funeral and commit the body to the ground. He thought it was cute because he also calls himself a pastor. I don't know what church he's actually a pastor of, but he calls himself a pastor. Be that as it may. Yes, I'm going in, because I think it's time that we pull the curtain back on a lot of the foolishness, and we don't talk about these things, right? We don't talk about when we have qualified Black folks running, that folks don't coalesce behind them because somebody wants to hold on to power till the Lord calls them home, that they don't believe in succession planning. Okay, so when Representative Ashley Gantt duly won the seat, the common thing, the respectful thing, not only to the new elected, but to the community, is to have a transition meeting and say, hey, here are some of the problems you may deal with in this district. Here are some of the bills that I've been trying to introduce for the last 3 sessions, but couldn't get passed. Maybe you can talk to so-and-so, because again, it's about benefiting the people that you claim to care about, that you used to serve, that you spent your time allegedly serving, if you were actually serving, right? Mm-hmm. So to not even have that meeting is a way to set Representative Ashley Gantt up for failure. But really funny how that works, how karma and the Lord works, okay? Because again, this is a person who purports to be a person of God, right? Karma ain't cute. And when you act and put your own ego above the people, it's going to come out. And I'm putting it out there right now from the standpoint of Ashley, as someone who has been my friend, as somebody I have watched grow and evolve as an attorney into an elected official. You have done a huge amount with having been given nothing, having to literally make a way out of no way and go into a hostile environment in Tallahassee that is not friendly to people of color, certainly not friendly to Black women. And at the end of the day, I'm put that out there for him, anybody else. Proximity to power is not the same as actual power. And when these people are done using you, when they're done putting you up next to them in their press conference because they're trying to pass something that's going to harm the Black community, they're going to cut you to the curb the same way. And it's the same community you're going to have to come back to in order to have solace and to be able to move forward. So, I mean, it's really time for a lot of these electeds out here to realize that there's a thing called succession planning. We would not be in the situation that we're in with the Supreme Court if somebody had done succession planning. We would not be sitting here and Uncle Joe, thank you for forgiving my loans. Like, I'm a stand Joe Biden, end of, right? But
succession planning, right? Like he didn't want to run. He made it clear he didn't want to run the first time, but he felt that the American people had no choice. So again, as a party, we have to plan and know that folks are going to have to step aside at some point. Who is going to pick up the mantle and run forward? So with that, now that I'm going to get off my soapbox, you're up for re-election this year. So can you talk a little bit about the accomplishments, some of like the high points of your first term, what you'd like to do for the next term, and of course, very importantly, share with people how they can support you. Of course. So thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that, because sometimes Black women are put on this island of you can do everything and do it all, and you shouldn't complain. You shouldn't have bad days. You can't have bad days. You have to be strong. And I'm like, thank God for people who are willing to help me, because when I say I got nothing, I didn't even have an office for months, right? And so I got nothing. But I figured it out. I called people. I called Senator Jones, allowed my staff to be in his office until we found an office. Like, it's things like that that allowed me to say, okay, I can do this. Even on days where it really did feel impossible. And, there are still some of those days like that. But I got 2 bills passed my first year. And this past session, what I learned is that this was just, it wasn't officially told to me by anybody. It wasn't officially told to me by the speaker. But like, I asked a lot of good questions last year, and I challenged a lot of the foolishness. And it was a common feeling of like, oh, we have to figure out how to leverage Gantt not asking questions. So it was like, well, they said, they were like, oh, it's a process. No, it's not a process, because I did everything. I did the letters. I set up the meetings. I harassed some of my colleagues that had the power to put my stuff on there. Never got a meeting with the speaker this second session. Popped up in the office several times. Okay. My aide sent several emails, text messages, phone calls. Okay. But I wasn't going to not ask the questions. Like, that's what I was elected to do. I was elected to challenge these bills. I was elected to, and honestly, I knew I was going into a super minority numbers game, right? So what was my power? My power was my voice. My power was my effective questions. Because when these bills go to court, there has to be a legislative record that was established that clearly defines and says, we knew what the intent, we knew what the consequence would be. We knew that this part was vague or unconstitutional. So I don't have the ability to just sit and be quiet so that you can give me $150,000 in a multi-billion-billion-dollar budget. Because by the way, the Black representatives across the board, the Democratic Black representatives, got 1% of the budget for requests. And so it wasn't an Ashley thing. It was how the Speaker of the House and how the appropriations chair decided to give fund projects. And I also want to distill it a lot more than just being the Black reps. I want to say that they funded infrastructure projects more than they actually funded programs for our communities. So I don't sell out or be quiet. I ask questions and I challenge y'all, because that's that literally y'all could pass whatever y'all want to do, whether I show up or not. But creating that legislative record was very important, because a lot of communities, organizations, people depended on being able to sue because the bill was going to pass. So my skill set as a lawyer, I used it, and I used it effectively, what I was supposed to do. And I know that it was effective because sometimes I would be asked not to ask a question, or I will be asked over and over, you got questions for my bills? You got questions? I was like, I don't know, I haven't read it yet. And by the way, I read my bills, because if it's a 60-page bill, on page 29, that's where you're gonna find the craziness and be like, what is this? And then there was some bills that were priority to the Speaker and the Senate President that I voted no on, because I knew it would impact my community. Like the Live Local bill, I voted no on all iterations of the Live Local bill, because I know that my community is facing gentrification in an alarming rate. And that is something that my community is very much concerned about. And it took away the ability to, one, have a community meeting to decide on what the development looks like and have the community have a voice in it. And it took away, it had preemptions in it when it came to building height. And that was the first iteration of it. And then it came back and it restored that ability for the local governments to be able to regulate that. But it still was not good. So I was like, y'all gonna pass this anyway, but y'all not gonna pass it with my yes. Wow. So I was able to be very effective in that way. And I did create some relationships where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they expressed, we respect you. We wish you didn't ask some questions, but we respect it. And honestly, you keeping us on our toes. And not for nothing, they would say, that's very different from your predecessor. We're glad you're here. And I'm like, well, you know what? That ain't got nothing to do with me, but thank you for the compliment of saying you're glad I'm here. Like the other part, that has nothing to do with me. When I get paid to represent somebody, that's when I represent them. I'm not like, this is not pro bono work for me. So, now, and I was also told that I would only get a certain amount in appropriations. I was given that, and I was given that. And I was just like, so, okay. So not only did I not have the benefit of a transition meeting or anything like that, but I was actively fighting against beating him, if that makes sense. But it was still rewarding. I learned a lot. And so I am running again, and I have two opponents. One that usually runs against Dottie Joseph, and one that I ran against last time. So they're both challenging me. And when we talk about the succession planning, I am literally the next generation. I grew up in this community. My aunts and uncles still live in this community. And so just because I wasn't out with my name all over everything to you, because other people knew me, because I've been doing the work in the community. My former opponent has phrased me as an outsider. I'm like, I grew up at my auntie and uncle house around the corner in Brownsville. And their family is an old Miami family who's been there for decades. So, okay. Maybe I'm an outsider because I was born like in the 80s or something, and you feel like maybe I should have been born sooner. If that's, I don't know, but like, okay. So it's just been the most absurd thing because I'm like, I am the ones you're saying you're preserving the history for. I am actively engaging in the process of making sure Black Miami is not erased from the story, from the narrative of Miami every single time. Because every single time when I'm up there, I'm Black Miami, Black people in Miami. Because we exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so, you know,
Yeah,
you
but
know.
yeah, I mean, it's
How can you support me?
that part.
Ashley.vote. Campaign donations are absolutely being accepted right now. And I will be having a fundraiser at the end of May. So I'll have that information coming out. And if you want to volunteer with my campaign, Ashley.vote, you can sign up to volunteer. We knock on doors, we get information out. Like knocking on doors was really like the best part for me. I got to work on my little Spanglish and I got to meet like just it's very different when you grow up in a community versus like when you're learning it to represent it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so many different moving parts. Like this street, the state owns. This street is local. This street, that might be feds. Like all of these different things that I've learned over the last couple years, like just meeting with agency heads. Hey, I'm Rep Gantt. I want a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I have been compiling just different resources, and I'm going to, my team and I, we have a summer deadline for us to like have this resource where we can just, hey, this is everything that you can take advantage of. And I'm still learning more things. So I'm calling different colleagues. I even call Republicans like, hey, I saw that you did this. Tell me how you did this. Because at some point, I don't have to agree with you. And I usually don't agree with them on some stuff. And there's like a good idea is a good idea. A good program is a good program. And if they have that and that's just, hey, I need like, can you give me that information? I'll have my aide contact your aide. And I get it. And I share it with my community. It's about giving the resources. And so, I'm back in it. Campaign time. We are in it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show up very authentically like I did last time. And I've done the work. And I see how much work that we need done in our community. And we only have 4 terms because we're term limits, or term limits limited. You get it.
There are term limits, therefore you are term limited.
Correct. And so I'm excited. It's some young people, some Gen Zers that have approached me like, I'm interested. And I'm like, girl, I'm about to teach you, honey. Like, come on. Like, because I firmly believe that we do have to have a succession plan. We do have to have people that are, ready to take this on, and that they need to know what it means to take this on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the best training is to volunteer for a campaign so that you can see the nuts and bolts of what it takes to get into elected office, and then volunteer once your candidate is elected so that you see the nuts and bolts of what it takes to be in said office, right?
Correct. And I'm not gatekeeping that information. I want to share it because I want my community to keep thriving. And I am not so caught up on myself that I think I have to do it. Matter of fact, I know I'm not the only one that's tasked to do it. Because when Gwen Cherry ran, Gwen Cherry created a legacy for all of us. Mm-hmm. And I take that every single day. Like I have pictures of her all over my offices because I'm like, what I will not do is take for granted the sacrifices that she made. I know I had many days where I was crying in Tallahassee. Many. Okay. And I still had, my roommate was Rep Rayner. I have a Black woman leader Driscoll. Like I have all these Black women, Rep LaVon Bracey Davis, Rep Angie Nixon, all of us, we always checked on each other. Like I can look over and see another Black woman. She had nothing. And this year was her 45th anniversary of her passing, and I did an event in Tallahassee, which had never been done before. I commemorated her in Tallahassee, and then I have an art exhibition at the History Miami Museum that's free, that's open until June. That was curated by the Black Archives, and we partner with the History Miami, and they donated that space.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, when I was researching her, one of the main documents I used was a dissertation by a student from FSU, and he like chronicled so much, and it was a dissertation, so it was detailed. But some of the same things she experienced, we're still experiencing as Black women in the legislature.
And this was, let's be clear, for those who may not know, Gwen Cherry was the first Black woman elected to the state house.
The Florida legislature, period.
Florida legislature, period. But she served in the House.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, she died way before her time due to a tragic car accident in Tallahassee. But she left a legacy that also included being the namesake for the Gwen S. Cherry Black Women Lawyers Association, of which I am a past president, and of which Ashley has been a longtime board member. And just, she's really our North Star on so many things. So definitely drop the link to the exhibit in the chat, as well as to more information about her so folks can learn about it. Because again, it's Black history, not just, yes, it's Florida history, but it's U.S. history, right? So, if we learn about who the first woman is on the Supreme Court and the first woman over here, let's talk about the first Black woman to be elected to this type of role in the state, and not that long ago.
Correct.
Like 100 years ago.
Right. So 1970. And at her funeral, Governor Graham delivered her eulogy, and he just passed away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I know I stand in the footsteps of a lot of amazing women. And so even on the hard days, I'm like, you know what, girl, somebody had it worse. And I don't diminish like that it's difficult for me, but I also know that like our ancestors faced death, and that always brings me back to perspective, honey. They faced death, and their existence, continued existence, was a sign of revolution and opposition. And so when I have moments of joy, I remember that joy is also a revolutionary act. And, I'm in this space, so I have to learn it, and I challenge it. And, I think about how effective I can be for my community, because that's really what it's about. It's not about me, baby. It's not. This public official role, baby, it is not like this is not something that I'm like, oh, I have to have. Like, I am very grateful to be in this role, and I know that I'm in this role to serve. So it's not about me or my ego. And that some stuff that needs to get accomplished, and I know some things that can get done, and I am working to get them done so that people know what resources they have, and they also know they feel empowered. So my whole goal, or my theme for this first term, is engage, educate, empower. Like, I don't need to be the one with all the answers. Here you go. This is how you find your answers. And I empower you.
That part. So the election, the primary is be a Democratic primary. And when is it exactly? What's the date?
Hold on, child. Let me see.
And while we're nailing down the date, I'll just remind people, number one, if you are in House District 109, which encompasses Brownsville,
Liberty City, Allapattah, the historic Overtown, downtown, unincorporated parts of Miami-Dade, Westview, West Little River, and Opelika.
If you're in any of those areas, number one, make sure that you are right. Well, first of all, let me back up. If you're anywhere in the sound of our voice, number one, make sure you're registered to vote. Let's start with that. Now's the time to check your registration, not like 2 weeks before the election, right? Number one. Number two, if you register to vote by mail in the state of Florida, your registration for voting by mail has lapsed. Not your voter registration, but your ability to vote by mail has elapsed. So every time there's an election, you need to reach out to the supervisor of elections office in your county to ask for a vote by mail ballot. I did it super fast. You can go online and just, for us in Miami-Dade, you go on the Miami-Dade SOE's website, boom, boom, click a couple things, and boom, you're going to get your vote by mail ballot. I highly recommend it because then that way you can take your time, you can research the candidates, you can look at various slate cards from different organizations that you're aligned with, read articles, that sort of thing, and you can either mail in your vote by mail ballot or you can drop it off at any early voting place or at the supervisor of elections office. So it gives you more options, and so then you're not scrambling at the last minute. So there's that. Secondly, if you do not live in HD 109, like I don't, for instance, hey, that's okay. Make sure to spread the word to your friends and family and acquaintances and coworkers who live in HD 109 that they need to vote in this election. And lastly, I will say this. I am fully endorsing Representative Ashley Gantt with every fiber of my being. I endorsed her back in 2022. I'm endorsing her in 2024. And knowing her and her character, I'm endorsing her again in 2026, right? Because she's about that life. So, do your research, learn about everybody who's involved in this race, and hopefully you'll be able to see why I endorse Ashley, and I hope you do too. Now, remind us what the date of the primary is?
August 20th, 2024. And make sure, like Mabel said, please, if you vote by mail, register to vote by mail. You have to re-register. And, what I want to leave people with is, if you don't get involved now, do you want to live with the regret later? And that's why I'm doing this. I'm like, I'm doing it for the kids. And people are like, you don't even have kids. I know. But I care about these kids just the same. And I have the ability to do it, So I'm juggling so many hats, like my law firm hat. I was just, in my office doing my law firm work. I got to go back and schedule some appointments. Then I put on a state rep hat because I got stuff to do. Then I have to take all those hats off and put on a campaign hat. And so this summer is going to be awesome.
It's going to be festive. That's how we're going to call it. So, Rep. Ashley Gantt, thank you so much for joining us on Mondays with Melba. For everyone who wants to learn more, I will be sure to put her link in the comments so that way you can click, learn more, donate, volunteer, whatever you can do. But most importantly, spread the word and vote. Y'all, take good care.
All right. Thanks, Melba.